Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, where we take up the articles from the Hindu and discuss them as per the demands of civil services examination. The topics of the discussion are listed on your screen. As today is Thursday, it's time for the question of the week. On your screen is the question for the week. The topic has featured on the DNS dated 3rd March 2023 and was taken by Jatin sir. Answer the question in 250 words and submit your answers on the eLearn portal so that it can be evaluated from the expert evaluators at the Raus IAS study circle. Moving on to the first article of the day. Now this article highlights the challenges that the press or the media today currently face in India. Moving on, the challenges that the press or the media today currently face in India. The article further highlights the reactionary action against the news channels that have been put forward by the central agencies in the recent times. And these press media have been the victim of strong state action that includes popular news like that of Quint, Alt News, NewsClick, Wire, etc. Not only the media per se, but also the independent journalists have also been targeted under the state action. And thus this article tries to explain how the action made by the state is going against the concept of free press. Through this article, we'll try to understand the issue of press freedom, that is, what basically constitutes as press freedom, why press freedom is important, what is the reason behind the curb on press freedom not only in India but also globally, the repercussions of such curb on the freedom of press, and what can be done to ensure that the press freedom is maintained. Now this topic is important as we'll discuss the press freedom from the ethical perspective. And the GS4 provides for various ethical issues that are involved today in the society. And a question on similar lines can be asked in the mains examination regarding the importance of press freedom, the possible repercussions, and the way forward to solve such problem. So going on with our discussion, the first thing to understand here is what basically is press freedom. Now press freedom from an ethical perspective can be understood that states and any of the allied powers of the state must not interfere with the free expression of thought through media. Now this media can be both print media, that is written media, or through audiovisual press, that is through social media or popular television. Further, it explains that there should be no prior censorship or persecution of any kind as a result of free expression of ideas through the medium of press. Now this press freedoms becomes important by the logic that for any democratic society to function, freedom of press is the fundamental right which has to be enjoyed by the society at large. Since this democratic society can only function when there is formation of free opinion and research on the issues that are of public interest. To articulate the public interest and to represent the demands of public at large, press freedom is important. This will not only keep the government accountable for its decision to the public who have elected them, but also represent the continuous interaction between people and the government, as elections are a 5-year exercise. And to ensure the continuous interaction and the government to be responsive, it is necessary that the views of the people and the interests of the people are well articulated and presented towards the government by the medium of press. Further, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights also provides for the freedom of press, and thus it can be concluded that freedom of press is the most important ingredient for any functioning democratic society. This brings us to the next question, that what are the reasons behind the curb on press freedom in the recent time? Now there has been a rise of right-wing ideology around the globe. Government world over, through various reports on the working of democracies, it has been highlighted that there is a rise of autocratic tendencies, and these autocratic tendencies are becoming dominant globally. And thus, the moral suasion of powers against this autocratic government are now declining. So this is the first reason why the press freedom is on a decline world over. Secondly, there have been popular support for the autocratic actions in many of the society, and the people or the civil society is giving active support to such autocratic actions that are being taken by the government of the day. Further, another reason for decline in press freedom globally is the era of propaganda that has been flourishing with the era of social media or digitalization revolution. This is the age of internet with active presence of social media. And now it has become much easier for the fast circulation of information through internet and the social media to foster public opinion on any issue. And this medium or the social media is many times utilized for the spread of false news and to propagate hate against sections of the society. Further, globally, there has been a preference for materialism over the virtue, and the government of the day at any cost want to maintain their power and to maximize their powers, and thus the political parties world over are using any tactic that is at their disposal to maintain or to cling to the power that they have acquired. And this has led to the erosion of virtue from the society. And to maintain this propaganda and to clinch to power, they use the press to their advantage, and the media that was to be used to highlight the public opinion and raise the public interest is now used as a propagandistic tool by the running government. This brings us to the next part of our discussion, that what are the probable repercussions of such action, or what are the repercussions of declining press freedom. The first impact of declining press freedom is that there is an erosion of ethics in the society. Now, justice and truth can be regarded as the most important virtue of any functioning society. But due to decline in press freedom and non-formation of public interest, the truth that has to prevail will be curbed by the state machinery. And this ultimately will lead to erosion of ethics in the society and failure in the formation of collective ethics against the wrongdoers. The second repercussion that can be caused by the declining press freedom is that society may lack role models. Now, by the use of media as a propaganda tool or decline in the press freedom, wherein the good role models are not highlighted by the press, there can be absence of role models which are to be looked upon by the people, and by the use of propaganda tool, negative role models can emerge, and the aspiration to match the same levels and become like them will arise, which will make it further difficult to protect the right of citizens against them. At last, the last repercussion of such declining press freedom will be the dilution of morals of the social contract. Now, when the government itself is engaged in curbing the rights of its subjects, then it will basically lead to the shaking of social contract between the people and the state, and will challenge the basic democratic ethos of the society. So, it needs to be highlighted that press freedom is very important for us for giving voice to the voiceless, to act as a public watchdog, enhance the vibrance of a democracy, and to shape the public perception. The press freedom can be highlighted by the fact that it was very important at the time of freedom movement also, and how press and the media played a role in generating the public consciousness against the British Raj. The main aim of the press is to ensure accountability and raise the social consciousness such that the interest of the people at large is better represented. But today, globally, there has been spread of misinformation, generation of insensitivity towards core topics, and the press has also been used for religious marginalization up to some extent with the propagation of hate speech. So this brings us to the last part of our discussion, that what should be done. The first step that can be taken is to the application of fundamental right to privacy that has been drawn from the K.S. Puttaswamy judgment of 2017. As even after 5 years of the judgment, the application to the criminal justice system is still awaited in the case of electronic evidences. Further, there is also a need to restructure the D.K. Basu guidelines as they are relevant for digital India. Further, there is a need for strict procedural safeguard for digitization. Next, the role of civil society should be ascertained, and civil society can only play a dominant role here to raise the voice against any autocratic action by the state, and it is the foremost duty of society as a whole to raise the voice against any wrongdoing in the society, as it can also be represented through a popular saying that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and thus there is a need for the civil society to come out of us versus them phenomena and raise the public consciousness against the arbitrary action by the state. At last, it should be the duty of the court to intervene, as courts in India are regarded as the guardians of fundamental rights of people in India, and thus they need to protect the rights of the people. With this, we have discussed the issue of press freedom, what basically press freedom is, why it is important, the reason behind the curb on press freedom in the recent time globally. Moving on to the next article of the day that has featured on page 14 of the Hindu, basically talks about the relationship between India and Australia. Now, this article is in news because of the visit made by the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese recently, and the article also highlights that Australia will host Exercise Malabar for the first time. The article also highlights that India will also for the first time participate in Australia's Talisman Sabre exercise. On his visit to India, Australian PM said that India is a top tier security partner for Australia and further highlighted that his visit to India highlighted the Australian government commitment to place India at the heart of Australia's approach towards the free Indo-Pacific and beyond. Further, the same article also highlights a major step towards the Indo-Australia relationship as the both countries undertook maritime patrol aircraft deployment to each other's territories for the first time. And the visit also marked the inaugural session for the Australia-India General Rawat Defence Officer Exchange Program. Through this article, we'll try to understand the relationship timeline between India and Australia. What are the areas of cooperation of relationship between India and Australia? And what can better be done to further strengthen the relationship between the two countries? Now, this topic is important from the GS2 perspective as GS2 provides for international relations and particularly mentions bilateral relations as a part of subjects of GS2 mains examination. We'll first begin our discussion by tracing the relationship between the two countries. Now, the India-Australia bilateral relationship has been underpinned by the shared values of pluralistic, Westminster-style democracies, Commonwealth traditions, and expanding economic engagement over the time. This expanding economic engagement has also been matched by the high level of interaction between India and Australia. Further, India and Australian relationship have several common traits. That is, both the countries are vibrant democracies. They have a strong independent judicial system and a free press. All these will serve as a foundation for closer cooperation between the two countries. The end of Cold War and the beginning of India's economic reform in 1991 provided the much needed impetus for development of closer ties between the two nations. As India started looking outwards after post-1991 reforms, the ever-increasing number of Indian students travelling to Australia for higher education and the growing tourism has further paved the way for strengthening of relationship between the two countries. Now, with the passage of time post-1991 reform, the transformation of relationship also took place, and this has happened in the direction of strategic relationship between the two countries. There has been a new trajectory of transformational growth between the two countries. The strategic partnership today has diversified itself, and there is broad convergence over issues like that of terrorism, a shared commitment towards rules-based Indo-Pacific, and a cooperation in the plurilateral platforms like that of UN and other bodies. Both the countries have also been the members of Quad. Further, in 2014, the then Australian PM Tony Abbott visited India, and Prime Minister Modi in the same year paid a visit to Australia and became the first Prime Minister to address the joint sitting of the Parliament of Australia. It was in the year 2018 that Australia announced an implementation of an Indo-economic strategy for 2035. The strategy was based on three pillar strategies that range from economic ties, geostrategic engagement, and that of cultural diplomacy. Under the economic ties, it was seen that the Indo-Australian relationship was stuck on tier 2 level. Despite of the partnership that both countries enjoy with each other was that of tier 1. And this area was further highlighted because of India's economic growth, the Indian appetite for the resources, demand for energy, high level of skill workforce that it provides, technical knowledge, and the investment which made India and Australia a logical partners for each other. This economic ties and the paper that was floated as a 2035 strategy between the two countries finally led to the culmination of ECTA, that is the Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement between the two countries that was finalized in the year 2022. In the same paper, the second pillar of engagement between India and Australia was that in the geostrategic sphere. Now we have seen that from traditional trade relations, Indian and Australian relations have transformed into a strategic partnership. And the global focus on Indo-Pacific and the importance of this region for both the countries have invited the two countries to have a broader geostrategic engagement in the Indo-Pacific region. As high volumes of trade has been passing through this area, and thus the two countries have particular interest in securing a rules-based order and free and open Indo-Pacific region, and thus are suited to be natural allies in this area. The third pillar that was highlighted in this relationship was that of culture. Culture was highlighted as an important part with a thrust on soft diplomacy. As Indian diaspora in Australia now constitutes a sizable number and is one of the fastest growing diaspora in Australia. And this Indian diaspora can play a critical role in creating personal links in the field of business, arts, education, politics, and in the field of civil society. And the two countries, that is India and Australia, in 2020 decided to upgrade their partnership to the level of comprehensive strategic partnership. Now we'll try to analyze the areas of cooperation between the two countries. The first area of cooperation is that of economic cooperation. Now in 2021, India was Australia's sixth largest goods and service trading partner, and on the other hand, for India, Australia was the fourth largest good and service export market. Further, the total value of bilateral trade between the two countries was estimated to be around $27.5 billion. And with the signing of the ECTA between the two countries, there is a potential for the two countries to reach an amount of $50 billion in the next 5 years, as India has signed its first trade agreement with a developed country in a decade and has led to an immediate reduction of duty to zero on 96% of Indian exports to Australia in value and zero duty on 85% of Australia's exports in value to India. The second area of cooperation between India and Australia is in the field of people-to-people ties. Now we have seen that the Indian diaspora in Australia has been increasing. India is one of the top source of skilled immigrants to Australia. And as per the 2021 census, 9.76 lakh people in Australia have reported their ancestry as that of Indian origin, making them second largest group of overseas born residents in Australia. The third area of cooperation between India and Australia is in the field of education. The two countries have earlier signed mutual recognition of education qualification, and this signing of mutual recognition of educational qualification agreement between the two countries would facilitate the mobility of students between India and Australia. We have seen that post 1991 reforms who were going to Australia for higher education was increasing. And with the signing of this agreement, the mobility will further increase, and top universities from Australia like that of Deakin and Wollongong are planning to open their campuses in India. Another area of cooperation that has gained significant prominence in the recent times between India and Australia is in the field of defense cooperation. The two countries have entered into 2+2 ministerial dialogue in the year 2021. The countries have also concluded mutual logistic support agreement in 2020, and the militaries of the two countries have held several joint exercises with each other. We have seen that Australia will also hold a Malabar exercises, and apart from that, exercise like Ostra Hind, Pitch Black, etc. have seen participation from both the countries. Another area which binds Australia and India together closely is in the field of response towards China, or the China factor. Now, the ties between Australia and China have been strained, and the strain became evident between the ties between Australia and China, particularly in the year of 2018 when Australia banned Chinese telecom firm Huawei from the 5G network. Later, Australia also called for the inquiry into the origins of COVID-19 and has also slammed Chinese actions in the human rights violation in the Xinjiang and the Hong Kong region. And as we all know, India has been facing aggressive China right from the starting of 21st century and has been countering aggressive Chinese military along the borders. The both countries, that is India and Australia, are now together facing the increasing Chinese risk and support for a rule-based international order. Thus, a common challenge in the form of China for both India and Australia have finally led the two countries to align their interests, and both the countries have joined the Quad dialogue, which was revived after a period of 15 years. Another area of cooperation between India and Australia is in the field of clean energy. Both the countries have signed letter of intent on new and renewable energy in 2022 only. And this letter of intent brings to provide for cooperation in bringing down the cost of renewable technologies. Civil nuclear cooperation is another field of cooperation between India and Australia, as the two countries in 2014 entered into a civil nuclear agreement, and to facilitate the transfer of nuclear material to India, Australian Parliament passed the Civil Nuclear Transfer to India Bill in 2016, which ensured that the uranium mining companies in Australia will have to fulfill contracts to supply Australian uranium to India for its use. The last area of cooperation between India and Australia that can be highlighted is in the field of close consular cooperation. The two countries, that is India and Australia, have entered into the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty and the Extradition Treaty in 2008, and the two countries have also signed the Social Security Agreement, as we have seen that the Indian diaspora or Indian working in Australia have been on the increase. So by understanding the areas of cooperation between India and Australia, we can see that the strategic depth between the two countries have evolved in the recent times and has transformed the nature from just the relationship between the two countries, from the trade ties or economic cooperation to broader strategic cooperation in the geostrategic and the defense field, which is also seen in collaboration at the multilateral agencies like that of UN and bodies like WTO. So this brings us to the question that what can be the way forward? Now the way forward for India and Australia is that both countries can play a strong role in creating a safe and prosperous Indo-Pacific region, and for this the Quad partnership must be leveraged by the two countries. Further, India and Australia need to take the leadership role in the maritime security affairs in the two oceans, that is the Indo and the Pacific, and have to simultaneously increase deeper engagement with the Pacific and the Indian Ocean island countries. The third area of cooperation that can be further explored between India and Australia is that of joint defense manufacturing, that has today a tremendous potential to be explored, and India and Australia needs to enter long-term reciprocal access arrangement, a similar type of arrangement that India has signed with the United States of America. Further, the last area that can go a long way in further strengthening of ties between India and Australia is close cooperation in critical emerging technologies that will be a win-win for both the countries and will also include some of the key areas that needs to be explored between the two countries in the field of artificial intelligence, semiconductors, drones, exploration of 6G technology, blockchain, cybersecurity, and ensuring supply value chains for each. With this, we have seen the areas of cooperation between the two countries, the way forward or the steps that can be taken to further strengthen the partnership between India and Australia. And also at the beginning, we have traced the evolution of relationship between India and Australia. Moving on to the last article of the day that has featured on page 10 of the Hindu, basically talks about the Indian logistical system and the steps that need to be taken in order to make Indian logistics sector a fruit-bearing effort. Now the articles highlight the need for increased adoption of railways for cargo movement, which is crucial for improving the country's logistical competitiveness. Now if we try to understand this article, we'll try to focus on the logistics sector in India as a whole. Meaning thereby, through this article, we'll try to understand what basically is the real meaning of logistics? What is the importance or the contribution of the logistics sector to the economy? What steps that the government has taken till now to boost the logistics sector in India? The challenges that the logistics sector as a whole faces in India and the way forward to realize the true potential of logistics sector in India. Now this topic is important as the GS3 talks about the infrastructure and the contribution by the different sectors of the infrastructure to the Indian economy and the investment models. Will try to understand the logistics sector in this framework. The first thing to understand here is what basically is logistics. If we go in a nutshell to understand the real meaning of logistics in India, it refers to the overall process of managing how the resources are acquired, stored, and transported to their final destination. Meaning thereby, right from the very stage of acquiring of raw material, supplying it to the manufacturing units, its distribution to the customer or the retailers, and finally in the hands of end consumer, and this whole chain can be termed as the logistic chain in India. The term logistic is now widely used in the business sector today, and particularly those by the companies that are involved in manufacturing sectors. And it basically deals with how the resources are handled, moved along the supply chain network. This brings us to the second part of our discussion, that what is the importance of logistics sector for the economy. Now, India's logistics sector is estimated to be around 14.4% of the Indian GDP. Now, this sector becomes more important as the unorganized sector amounts to over 90% of the logistics sector in India. That is 90% plus of the logistics sector in India is unorganized in its nature. Now, the contribution is also important because India has particularly high cost of logistics. This, when compared to the other member of the BRICS countries, hold true, as the Indian logistic cost was around 14%, while that of the other BRIC countries it was around 11%. Another important role played by the logistics sector to the economy is that of job creation. The logistics sector provides livelihood to more than 22 million people, and it is being estimated by the various reports conducted for the logistics sector in India that improving the logistics sector will cause a 10% decrease in the indirect logistic cost that will ultimately lead to decrease in the cost of final goods, which ultimately will lead to boost to export by 5 to 8%, and the reason behind the same will be the cost competitive. Another importance of logistics sector to the Indian economy is the fact that the logistic markets in India is forecasted to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 10.5% between the year 2019 and 2025. And this increasing investment in the logistics sector will point towards a healthy growth of the Indian freight sector, which in turn will have a positive effect towards the overall Indian economy. So now that we have seen that logistics not only provide employment to 22 million people, and an investment in the logistics sector will also boost export and will ultimately benefit the unorganized sector of the economy. This brings us to the next part of our discussion, that what has the government done till now. The government, in order to boost the logistics sector in India, have taken several steps. The government has come out with the logistic master plan, and this is a geographical approach to the logistics sector as opposed to an industry approach. Under the geographical approach, several projects and activities will be integrated in a plan to expand the mix of intermodal or multimodal transportation, and this will involve coordinated construction of relevant infrastructure like gas utility pipelines, optical cable network, etc. The government has also come out with the national logistic policy, and the objective is to boost the nation's economy and competitiveness by establishing integrated, seamless, and a cost-efficient logistic network. The idea behind this national logistic policy is to establish single window e-logistics market and emphasize developing skill and the competitiveness of MSMEs. Apart from the logistics master plan and the national logistic policy that is focused on the single window e-logistics market, government has also passed the national logistics law. Now, this logistics law is under consultation and provide for a unified legal framework for a paradigm one nation, one contract, and would further boost the one nation, one market objective. And the provisions of this logistic law will enable assigning of distinct logistical account number in place of cumbersome registration process. The other steps that have been taken by the government in this regard is the National Logistic Workforce Strategy for integrated skill development of professionals who are engaged in the logistics sector, and also the national multimodal facilities and warehousing in order to promote intermodal and multimodal logistics park. So this brings us to the next question, that when the government has taken such elaborate steps for the logistics sector in India and has also drafted a national logistic law keeping in mind the contribution and the importance of logistics sector to the economy, what are the challenges that the logistics sector as a whole today faces? The first challenge is due to poor infrastructure facilities in India. The second is the lack of skilled labor in the logistics sector. Further, India also faces lack of warehousing, and increasing fuel costs have also contributed the cost of logistics to increase in India, and thus decreasing the competitiveness of the sector. High turnaround times at the port is also a factor that is impacting the logistics sector in India. The order intensity in India is not stable, which also impacts the development of logistics sector in India as a whole. Supply chain disruptions due to geopolitical issues and also issues like that of COVID-19 has further deteriorated the logistics sector in India. Logistics sector, due to its unorganized nature, is digitally averse, and there is a slow adoption of digital technologies in the logistics sector, which further plagues the competitiveness of this sector. There is a preference to road transport rather than environment friendly and much cheaper inland waterways and the railway transfer methods. And this sector, like any other sector, is marred by legal challenges and the bureaucratic burden of regulatory import and compliances at the level of exports, with non-uniformity with the global laws. All these factors combined, that is the bureaucratic hurdles, infrastructure problem, and the aversive nature of the sector itself, has contributed to the challenges in the full realization of logistics sector as a whole. So this brings us to the last part of our discussion, that what can be the way forward that can be adopted for the logistics sector in India. The first step that can be taken to boost logistics sector in India is integration. Integration in the form of multimodal network of transport and warehousing together. This will not only increase the efficiency but also decrease the transportation and the storage cost. Another area where it needs to be reformed is in the digital sphere. We have seen that the logistics sector is digitally averse as it is mostly unorganized in nature. The government should thus aim to upgrade the existing system in the matters of digital sphere that will lead to faster and better communication with fewer errors. We have also seen that the Indian logistics sector also faces the issue of warehousing, and this problem of warehousing needs to be solved such that the challenges due to supply chain network and its management can be adopted. In the recent year, it has been seen that the GST has played a role of enabler and has a positive impact on the logistic industry. And this was possible due to fixation of uniform rate of taxes along all the states and removal of entry levies by the state. And on the similar line, a tech-driven documentation approach needs to be adopted that will highly impact the logistics sector and will avoid any kind of transit delays and untimely deliveries caused due to improper documentation. With this, we have seen the way forward that needs to be adopted, and we have also understood what are the challenges that the logistics sector today faces, what are the government response or the steps that have been already taken, and what basically logistics sector as a whole is and its contribution or its importance for the Indian economy.